Hello, my name is Nicolas. Welcome to Meeplecare. Today I would like to show you how to set up and play Amalfi Renaissance. Amalfi Renaissance is a game for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and it plays in about 60 to 120 minutes. The game is designed by Takeo Yamada and the artwork is done by Urabe Rocinante. The game's publishers are R&R Games and Sylex. In this game we will be exploring the Mediterranean, gathering resources, building new ships, all in an attempt to rebuild Amalfi. Let's go to the table so I can show you how to set up and play Amalfi Renaissance.
Welcome to Amalfi, or at least what's left of it. It's the 15th century and the city of Amalfi has been destroyed by a tidal wave. You are a member of a merchant family and you want to help to rebuild this once great city. You will sail the seas to establish new trade routes and bring resources like spices and wine, gems, fabric and wood back home. You will use these resources to build new ships and lighthouses. You will fund paintings, books and monuments, and you will invite important people to the city and discover new private destinations. Of course, you're not the only family who wants to achieve this, so you will compete against the other families to earn titles and be the first to attend to the city council's wishes by fulfilling the decrees. Oh, and don't forget to feed your sailors. Before I show you how to play the game, let's start by setting up the main board and your player board. First up is the main board. Place the board in the middle of the table. On this board you can see a few different areas. The decree area, the atlas, the workshop, the title area, the council, and of course a map of the Mediterranean, showing you all the locations that you can visit to establish those trading routes. I will show you how to set up each of these areas, so let's start with the decree area. These are the decree tiles. They show you the wishes of the city council. And this is the symbol for a decree tile. You will shuffle the decree tiles and place 4 tiles face up in each of these 4 period slots. Each period resembles 1 game round, so there will be 4 rounds in the game. These decrees will help you to score points at the end of each round. While you are placing your decree tiles on the board, you will notice that in some spaces there are already some victory points printed on the board. Placing a decree tile in each spot will cause some of these symbols, the victory point symbols, to get covered up or to stay visible. This means that each time when you set up the game, the same tile can give you a different amount of points. So we just now place these other 3 tiles on the board. And this means that the decree area is now set up. Set the remaining tiles aside in a face-down pile. This is a private destination tile and it has this symbol. These will be destinations that can only be visited by the player who discovers them. Shuffle this deck and place them in 2 roughly equal piles face down on their spot on the board. Next, place 1 tile face up in each of these spaces. This area of the board is referred to as the atlas. It will always contain 5 private destinations. This is the area that is called the workshop, and this is the symbol for artwork cards. So now you can shuffle the deck of artwork cards and place 1 card on each of the appropriate spaces in the workshop. In this deck you will find 3 types of artwork. You will find books, paintings and monuments. Each of these types has its own background and symbol. The books have a red background and a triangle, a white triangle. The paintings have a blue background and a white circle. And the monuments have a green background and a white square. Obtaining artwork cards will score you points at the end of the game. Place the draw deck at the beginning of the row. And next to the draw deck you can see that there's a space for the discarded artwork cards. In this corner of the board we will place the title tiles. This is the symbol for a title tile And you will notice that these cards have the same symbol but a different color. During the game, you will be able to receive a title. The lighter green titles are easier to obtain than the darker green titles. Receiving a title will earn you points when you meet their requirements. Now shuffle the dark green tiles and place one tile face up in the first slot. Shuffle the light green tiles and place two of those tiles face up in the other two slots. Set the remaining tiles aside in two face-down piles, according to their back. This area of the board is the council. Here you will place character cards, and this is the symbol for a character card. There will always be 4 character cards available to invite to Amalfi. You will set up this area of the board after you have finished setting up the player board. So, let's move on now by setting up our player board. First, each player chooses a color and takes all player pieces of that color. You take 10 ships, 6 lighthouses, your score marker and 3 cubes of that color. You also take a bread token and of course a player board. Your player board resembles your part of the Amalfi coast. Just like with the main board, it also consists of a few different areas. Before setting up your player board, let me first show you these areas. This is your bay. It has this symbol, and this is the area where your usable ships are located, ready to explore the world. This small section of the board is your port. The port symbol shows you a moon. Ships in this area are no longer usable until the end of the round. Any ships that you construct will also start its voyage in the port area. Each time that you construct a ship, you will take it from your shipyard area. That's this area. This area also shows you how much food you will need to pay at the end of the round to feed your sailors. At the bottom of your board you have your warehouse. It is used to keep track of the amount of food at your disposal, and it's also the place from where you will take a lighthouse when you build one on the main board. The top part of your player board shows you 5 resource holes. You will place ships here resembling any of the 5 resources that you gather on your voyage. These resources are spices, wood, wine, gems and fabric. Next to the resource holes, there is a spot reserved for your starting hand token. More on that during the setup of your player board. On the side of the board, you see a summary of the 3 phases of the game and some optional actions. You also notice the cost to build a ship and an explanation of how you use your lighthouse. Of course, we will cover all this information in more detail. Let's continue now by putting all our player pieces on our player board. Place 4 ships in your bay. This is the symbol used for a ship. Place the other 6 ships in the shipyard. Place your 6 lighthouses on spaces 7 till 12 of the granary track. Place your score marker near the start of the score track and then give the windrose marker to the player that last visited the ocean. They will be the first player at the beginning of the game. Now each player places their bread token on the granary track. The first player places it on spot 3, the second in space 4, the third on the 5th space, and the 4th player places its token on the 6th spot of the track. When taking a closer look at the character cards, you will notice that some of the cards have a small icon in the top right corner. Each of these cards is part of a set of starting hand cards. There are 6 possible starting hands that you can choose. Each set points your focus onto one of 6 different things. 3 sets have an artwork symbol, with a focus on artwork. One set has a ship symbol, another set has a private destination symbol, and the last set has a wild symbol. Going in reverse turn order, each player chooses one of these 6 packs and places the token, the matching token, with the corresponding symbol in the slot on their player board. After you have played the game a few times, you can find an alternative way of dealing out starting hand cards in the rulebook on page 21. As a last step in the setup, shuffle all character cards, the deck of standard cards without a small symbol, and all the non-chosen starting hand cards. You would then reveal 4 cards in the council and place the rest of the character cards in a draw pile on its spot. Next to this draw deck, there's a place for a character discard pile. Before I teach you how to play, it might be a good idea to take a look at the game structure. Each game of Amalfi is played in 4 rounds, 4 periods. After each period, we score the appropriate degree. And after these 4 periods, the player with the most victory points is declared the winner of the game. Each round is divided into 3 phases. We have an action phase, a feeding phase, and a decree phase. The action phase is the main phase of the round. This phase is played in successive turns, during which each player performs an action or passes. Once a player has passed, their turn will be skipped for the rest of the period. As an action, you will be able to sail to destinations to get the resources, acquire artworks, discover private destinations, invite and engage characters, and construct ships and lighthouses. During the feeding phase, you will have to feed the sailors of your ships. And during the decree phase, you can score victory points according to the period's decree. A lot of actions that you take during the action phase require you to pay resources. So before we take a look at the action phase in more detail, I need to show you how you will take care of this. On your player board you have these resource holds. There's one for each resource in the game, and each hold shows you the matching symbol. I will show you in a minute how ships are placed into these holds, but during the game you will be able to move ships from your bay area to these resource holds. Now each time when you need to make a resource payment, you must move the ships on your personal board in one of 2 ways. And you can even combine these 2 ways of payment for the same purchase using the same ships. First, there's the standard payment. Each time that you see this symbol, it refers to this way of payment. During the standard payment, you can move ships from your resource holds back to your bay. Each ship that you move in this way will provide you with the indicated amount of that resource type. Moving 1 ship down from the gems hold would give you 3 gems. For 2 ships you would gain 6 gems. Anytime you obtain more resources than you need to pay, you can exchange those resources for food. So if I would like to buy this piece of art, I would need to pay 4 wine. I have 2 ships in my wine resource hold, and moving those 2 ships down would give me 6 wine. I only need 4, so I can buy this card for 4 wine, and the leftover 2 wine I can transform into food. So this would mean that I can put my food token, instead of on 3, I can put it in spot number 5. You can even move your ship without paying for anything, just to obtain that amount in food. So here, instead of 2 spices, I would be allowed to gain 2 food. Food is not considered one of the 5 resources. When you pay or earn food, you move the token on this granary track. At the start of the game, you have a storage capacity of 6 food. However, when I will show you how to build these lighthouses, you will be able to expand your storage capacity by 1 for each lighthouse that you build, up to a maximum of 12 food. So a way to gain extra food is to move your ship from any hold to your bay and gain the food instead of the resources. Using this standard payment method allows you to reuse your ships. So you could use them again during another turn in the same round. Sometimes you really want to take an action or buy something, but you just don't have enough ships or any ships in the appropriate resource hold. At that time, you can use the other method of payment, the emergency supply. When you use this method, you move a ship from your bay area to your port area. Each ship that you move in this way gives you 3 units of 1 resource of your choice. This is shown by this wild symbol. You can also choose to gain 3 food in this way. The big downside of this payment: each ship that you have moved into your port stays there until the start of the next round. So if I want to buy this card that costs me 4 wine, and I have only 1 ship, so this would mean I have now 3 wine, I can then move even the same ship to my port, adding another 3 wine. So I now have 6 wine. I can exchange the leftover into food, but since I'm limited to 6, I can only add 1. And I can still buy this card that cost me 4 wine. And again, the downside being that this ship now stays here until the start of the next round. Now that we know how to pay for our actions and to buy cards, we are ready to dive into the action phase. Each player, starting with the one that holds the windrows and continuing clockwise, performs one of the 6 actions or passes. Each round continues in this way until all players have passed. The first player to pass gets the windrows and becomes the first player during the next round. This is the symbol for the main action phase, and these are the symbols of the 6 main actions that you can take: navigation, acquisition, discovery, invitation, engagement, and ship construction. Of course, we will take a more detailed look at each one of them. You can also perform as many optional actions as you want, and you can perform them during one of the game's phases and even during an opponent's turn. You already know one of these actions, and that's payment. The other optional action allows you to discard a character card from your hand to gain 1 food, but more on that later. The first action is the navigation action. This action will allow us to gather resources and discover places to build a lighthouse and meet characters. To perform this action, you will move a ship from your bay area to the dock of a destination. This is the symbol for a dock. You can find these docks in the public destinations on the main board, but after you have discovered private destinations, you will also be able to dock at that location. But only the player who discovered this private destination is allowed to dock at that location. But let's first take a look at the public destinations. On the board, there will always be 11 public destinations that you can visit. 3 of these destinations are evolving destinations. After each period, one of these destinations will get covered up with a private destination. We will see how this works when we take a look at the end of the round. The other 8 public locations stay the same during the entire game. Most of these help you to acquire resources, meaning that you move ships from your bay to the appropriate resource holds. On the destination, you will see how many ships you can move to a hold. If you don't have enough ships, just send all that are available. You cannot visit a destination that already has a ship token, and when you dock at a destination, we resolve all the actions and benefits from left to right. If a destination shows you this arrow symbol, it means that you must pay the cost to gain the benefit of that destination. If you are unable to take advantage of all part of the benefits of that destination, simply do whatever you can. Visiting a destination to acquire resources works out like this. For example, you dock your ship in France. You pay 2 food, so you move your food token back 2 spots. And now you may move 2 ships from your bay area into your wine resource hold. The other 4 resources can be gained in a similar way. Here you get fabric, gems, spices or wood. And in this location you pay 3 food to move 2 ships to a resource hold of your choice. You can even choose a different hold for each of these 2 ships. So if I would have docked here, I would pay 3 food, and now I can place 2 ships on a resource hold. And I could even place maybe one on this wood resource hold and the other one in a gems resource hold. It's very important to know that if you cannot pay the cost in food, you cannot navigate to a destination. But remember that you can always use the optional action to move any ship from a resource hold back down to your bay to gain that amount of food. These other two public destinations allow you to activate different effects. When you visit this location, you see two new symbols. This symbol gives you 4 food and triggers an automatic effect. This effect is not optional and you need to perform it. In this case, you have to discard the rightmost card from the council, shifting the remaining cards to the right and refilling the row with a new card from the draw deck. On this location, you get a bonus effect, building a lighthouse, but you will also trigger another automatic effect. After building a lighthouse, you have to discard the rightmost artwork card and again shifting the rest of the cards to the right and adding a new card to the display. The lighthouse symbol shows you an arrow and a number. This means that you can build that many lighthouses. Whenever you build a lighthouse, you take the leftmost lighthouse on your player board. This makes room for one more food resource. You can then place your lighthouse on any available spot on the main board or on a private destination, including another player's private destination. If there is an icon below the lighthouse that you have built, like here in this case, you will now execute its effect. If you have already built all your lighthouses and you may build another one, you can choose to gain a character card or gain 2 victory points. To the right of this track, you can see how you can use a lighthouse. Whenever you or another player navigates to a destination that contains one of your lighthouses, you may now activate it, after the player that docked at the location has resolved all the actions on that location. Activating your lighthouse means that you can take one of 2 possible actions. You can either pay 2 food to move one of your ships from your bay to the resource hold shown on the destination, or you can gain 1 food instead. So in this case, I could choose to pay 2 food to move one of my ships to the wood resource hold, or I could choose to gain 1 food instead. So I would move my food token from 2 to 3. It's worth noting that if a player visits a destination with your lighthouse and you have already passed for that round, you still get to use your lighthouse. Activating a lighthouse on this wired location lets you move 1 ship from your bay to a resource hold of your choice. This doesn't have to be the same hold that the docking player chose. Placing this lighthouse was a bonus effect. If you dock at one of the 3 evolving destinations, you will trigger another bonus effect. This effect allows you to take a character card from the council into your hand. You can use this bonus before or after performing the main action of this destination. When you take a card from the council into your hand and you take it from any of these 2 slots, you have to pay a cost in food to take these cards. 2 food to take the card in the first position and 1 food for the second one. If, however, you choose the first card in the row, you would gain a food. After taking a card, you will shift all the other cards in the row and place a new card in the display. Taking a character into your hand doesn't allow you to take its benefits. To gain these, you will have to invite a character from your hand and place it in your game zone. But more on that later. Both of these effect symbols, building a lighthouse and gaining a character card, can be found on destinations, artwork cards and some character cards. And they are not part of the 6 main actions. Back to the evolving destinations. Visiting these locations during the first round will give you these 3 main actions. Here you pay 4 food to move 3 ships from your bay into your spices resource hold. Here you pay 4 food to move 2 ships into the wood hold. And here you pay 2 food to build a lighthouse, and then of course you still have to discard the first artwork card from the row. Later during the game, these destinations will get covered up by a private destination. Let's see how you can spend all these resources that you have gained. Maybe you can start by looking for some art, by using this second main action, and that's the acquisition action. This area of the board is called the workshop, and it is here that you can acquire those pieces of art. As we already seen, there are 3 types of artwork in the game: books, paintings and monuments, each with their own background and symbol. Each of these types has a main resource that will always allow you to acquire it, and you can see what that resource is when we take a closer look at these artwork cards. In the top left corner, you will see 1 or 2 types of resources that you need to pay, and you will also see how many of those resources you need to pay. The first one is the main resource. For example, for books, this is wine. For paintings, it's fabric, and it's gems for monuments. The second resource, if any, can vary from card to card. Whenever you buy a card, you can choose to pay with the main resource, the second resource, or a mix of both resources. If you are buying a card from one of these 3 slots, you will have to pay extra. For this card, you will have to pay 2 extra resources of these types. Here 1, and here also 1 extra resource. If, however, you buy the first card, you will gain a food. In the top right corner, you can see the victory points that you score when you buy a card. Each time when you gain points, you will move your score marker on the track. And in the middle of the card, you can see a bonus. These will allow you to gain food, resources, take characters and build lighthouses. So if I would want to buy this card, like we already did in the example, I would pay the resources, 4 wine, so I move these ships down, which gives me 6 wine. So I have 2 wine left over that I can transform into food. And then I can take the card. Any artwork cards that you buy are placed in your game zone. This is the area around your board. This card would allow me to score 6 points, and then I can take the effect, which allows me now to place one of my ships into the Spices resource hold. If you cannot take advantage of a bonus the moment when you buy the card, that bonus is lost. Just like when you bought a character card, you would now shift all the other cards 1 space to the right and add a new card to the workshop. As a third main action, you can sail the seas in search of new destinations with the discovery action. This is the symbol for the discovery action. When choosing this action, you can buy one of the 5 private destinations from the Atlas area and pay its cost. Just like with the artwork cards, choosing these locations will add resources to the cost of the destination. And picking the rightmost destination gains you 1 food. Each destination shows you the cost and the type of resource that you can use to pay the cost. You can again mix and match if there are 2 resource symbols. If you see this symbol, it means that you have to choose any one of the 5 resource types and pay that amount of resources from that type. After you paid for the destination, you can place its card in your game zone and immediately score those points. So here it would mean I could gain 2 points for this destination, and then again shift all the cards 1 space to the right and add a new card to the row of private destinations. This is now a location that only you can visit to gain its effect, but any player can build a lighthouse on it. So like I showed you during the navigation action, only you can dock at this location because it is your private location. But if another player built a lighthouse here, that player could now use its lighthouse after you have took advantage of all the actions on the tile. This next action is the invitation action. It allows you to invite people to Amalfi and make use of their services. You can only invite characters that are already in your hand. This means that you have acquired them through the previous take a character in your hand effect. Let me first show you what information you can find on a character card. In the top left corner, you can see what resources you need to pay to invite a character. This can be a cost in food or in resources. If the card shows you 2 types of resources, you can again choose to pay with one, the other, or both. Each time that you invite a character, You will place it from your hand into your game zone. In the top right corner, you can see what character type this character belongs to. Each character gives you one of 4 types of effects, and each has its own symbol. Let's take a look at these 4 types of effects. We have character cards with an immediate effect. These cards have a green lightning symbol. To invite this character, you will have to pay a cost in food. You can then use its one-time effect, but only at the time when you place this card into your game zone. So for this character, I would have to pay 4 food, but then I would be allowed to move 2 ships from my bay area into the wood resource hold. The infinity symbol resembles a character with a permanent effect. Its cost will be a number of resources. You can use this character's effect whenever the conditions on the cards are met. In the case of this card, when I have invited this character into my game zone, into Amalfi, each time when I construct ships, 2 or more, I get a reduction of 2 of the wood resource. The cross symbol means that this character provides you with the possibility to score victory points at the end of the game. Inviting this character will cost you a number of resources from one of the 5 main types of resource. Its effect shows you how many points you can score at the end of the game when you have met the criteria on the card. It also shows you the maximum points that you can score with this character. So in case of this character, I would pay 8 of one of the 5 resources, and then at the end of the game, I would earn 4 points for each ship that I have constructed. This up to a maximum of 24 points. This hand symbol shows that you can engage with this character. You can invite these characters with resources and or food. Unlike with the other characters, you can only use their effect when you engage them. This is a separate action, and you can find its symbol in this summary here on your player board and also on the card itself. Let me show you how this engagement action works. Once an engageable character is in your game zone, you can engage with it as an action. You apply the effect of that character and then you rotate the card a quarter turn. So if I want to engage with this card, I can earn as many food as there are characters in your game zone. So I have 1, 2, 3, so I could gain 3 food. But then I would have to rotate it sideways. Once it's rotated like this, you can no longer use its effect during that period. At the beginning of a new period, all the engageable characters in your game zone will be straightened. However, each time when you see this symbol on your board or a card, it provides you with an opportunity to straighten a card during the same round when it was rotated, allowing you to engage with it another time. Building my 3rd lighthouse would let me use this effect. So if I build my 3rd lighthouse and place it on the board, I would now be able to rotate this card back up and use it again during this round. You start the game with 4 ships in your bay, but of course that won't be enough to take all the actions that you want. So now it's time to take a look at our final main action, and that's the construction action. You can find the cost to construct a ship here to the side of your shipyard. During the first period of the game it will cost you 5 wood to build a boat. The second period the cost goes to 4. The same goes for the third period, and in the last period it will cost you 3 wood to build a boat. You are allowed to construct more than 1 ship during a turn, if you have enough resources to pay for the cost. So if we are in the first period of the game, you could now build your first ship for 5 of the wood resource. So moving down these 2 ships gives me 6 wood resource, and that means that I have 1 left over, so I can turn the 1 resource that I overpay into a food. For each ship that you construct, you take the leftmost ship from your construction yard and you move it into your port area. You cannot use it straight away, but at the start of a new period you will move all ships from your port to your bay. We will look at this in more detail during the feeding phase, but you can already see that each time when you construct a ship, you will need to pay more food during the feeding phase. Just like building the lighthouses, if you would ever build a ship and there's an icon underneath, you can now activate this icon. This icon is the icon that lets you gain a character card from the council to your hand. Building your last ship will allow you to take a character card or to straighten an engaged character. Now that you know all the main actions that you can take, there are still 2 actions on your board that we haven't completely covered. These are the optional actions, and you can take these at any time and as many times as you want. The first one we already know. It shows you how you can move your ship down to your bay or your port to acquire resources for payment, but you can, however, also move a ship down when you don't have to pay anything, just to get the amount of resources in food. This can help you when you don't have enough food during the feeding phase, or when you want to take an action with a food cost for which you don't have enough food. The second optional action has to do with characters and food. You are always allowed to discard any amount of character cards from your hand to gain that many food. So I could discard these 2 character cards to gain 2 food. Taking all these actions has made your sailors very hungry, so it's time to end the action phase and move on to the feeding phase. To feed the crew of your ships, each player must pay as much food as indicated in the rightmost space on their shipyard. As we can see, at the beginning of the game, this cost is 2, increasing by 1 for each ship that you construct. For each food that you cannot pay, you will lose 3 victory points. Don't forget that this is an excellent opportunity to move your ship down and gain food in that way. Now that everybody is well fed and rested, it's the end of the period, and it's time to check if you have fulfilled any of the council's demands. At the start of the game, you placed 1 random decree in every slot. It's possible that the holes in the decree tiles show you extra victory points. To score a decree, you will add these points to the tile's conditions when you score them. So let's take a look at this decree for the end of the first period of our game, and it allows us to score 4 points for each of the private destinations that we discovered during this period. So right now I would score 8 points for discovering these 2 private destinations. Once all players have scored their victory points, you will flip the decree to its other side. If it's the end of the first, second or third period, you would prepare for the next round. If it's the end of the 4th period, this would be the end of the game and the final scoring would take place. If, however, you need to start a new period, you will always follow the same steps. First, each player collects all the ships from their public destinations, the private destinations, and from their port, and places those into their bay. These will be the ships that you can use during the next round. Now, take the rightmost destination from the atlas and place it on the evolving destination slot corresponding to the period you're about to start. Remember that this bonus effect stays uncovered and that there is now an extra spot to build a lighthouse. Then shift the remaining destinations to the right and place a new tile at the beginning of the row. Discard the rightmost card in the workshop, again shifting all cards to the right and adding a new card. Straighten all the rotated characters in your game zone and discard the rightmost character from the council, shifting all cards 1 space to the right and adding a new character card to the council. Then the player with the win rows would begin a new round. Before we move on to the end of the game, there's still one part of the board that we haven't covered, and it's this title area. I would like to show you how these title cards can score you points. At any time, if you have met the minimum requirements for all the items required to obtain a title, you can place one of your cubes in the leftmost empty square of that title and immediately score you those points. So in this case of the visionary title, I can place one of my cubes here if I have built at least 4 lighthouses and I have invited 2 endgame characters. You can never place more than one of your cubes on the same tile. The darker green tile is harder to achieve, but will score you more points, while the lighter green tiles are a bit easier, but score you fewer points. For this patron title, you need to have invited one end of the game character, and you must have acquired 3 pieces of art. Once you have finished scoring the decree for the 4th period, you would now end the game by adding the victory points of any endgame scoring character cards to your victory point total. So in my case, I could now add 8 points to my total, because this character gives me 4 points for each piece of blue artwork that I have gathered at the end of the game. The player with the most victory points is of course the winner of the game, and in case of a tie, the player with the most cubes on tiles wins. If there is still a tie, the tied players share the victory.
This is all you need to know to set up and play Amalfi Renaissance. If you like this video, please click the like and subscribe button. And if you want to follow Meeplecare, you can do so on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. This was Meeplecare, taking care of your meeple needs.